Hello all, it's been a while for this channel. I haven't felt tons of motivation for a video until recently, when Jacob Hansen on Thoughtful Faith outlined the need for offensive apologetics. And speaking of Hansen, he also recently debated Trent Horn on the Book of Mormon, and I continued the debate in the comments. And frankly, some of the people I've tried to talk theology to, both there and in other places, seem to have dubious assumptions and ideas that I would like to explore and, where possible, dispel. So while on my scripture study channel I've been putting out a positive argument for my faith, here I would like to start a series where I note the philosophies and theologies that I find dead on arrival, or at least less than reasonable. All this to say, welcome to On the Other Hand, and welcome to the first video in the To Whom Else Shall I Go series. So let's start with some basics. Man has free will, and man is imperfect. In some ways, these topics are both incredibly easy to contemplate and also incredibly complicated. But here's how I see it. Epistemology is the study of how we know things, and for me the most fundamental idea behind free will is the most basic and classic idea of I think, therefore I am, put forward by Descartes. Because when it came down to it, how do we know what we touch is real? How do we know we aren't a brain in a jar or in some simulation? At the center of everything, the most basic thing we can know or observe is our own ability to think. We can't even know if others are rational beings like ourselves, because we can't actually observe their thoughts. So if the most fundamental aspect of how we know is that we can observe ourselves thinking, I would say our existence is self-evident. And similarly, our agency, or free will, or ability to choose, is also just as self-evident. I can verify that I have free will by exercising my free will, just like how I can verify that I exist by observing my ability to think. Obviously, this sort of philosophy goes deep, but fundamentally, you can't get any more practical and verifiable than this. Sure, you can walk through a mathematical proof of finding a volume of a cylinder, but conversely, if you want to know the volume of a can of food, you can just measure it. The volume, in this imperfect analogy, can be practically measured, and with that knowledge, we can actually do something with our lives rather than navel-gazing about philosophy. So for me, this is a basic realization, and it rules out schools of thought like Reformed theology, Calvinism, Sam Harris atheists, and those who believe we are entirely predetermined beings. Free will is just self-evidently true. With this free will, man can make mistakes. In fact, I would say without divine intervention, a man has to be imperfect and make mistakes. This is a self-evident idea for me as well. Theologically, we talk about Jesus Christ being a perfect being. But besides theological arguments, I've never seen or heard anyone make the claim that they truly know someone who was perfect, or who was infallible. This is true both from a big picture perspective and from a perspective of small details of our lives. Maybe one could argue that there is something as small as emotion or sentence or idea that is perfectly said or perfectly communicated, but I don't think so. The only times I've observed someone to have objectively done something perfectly or infallibly is when there are artificial or arbitrary limitations, like in a competition. And even then, the person is not said to have acted infallibly, but just that a very limited performance was as good as you can get for its circumstances. So those are my first two assertions that will have theological implications in later videos. Man has free will, and man is not infallible. Thanks, and I hope you enjoyed.